Let's look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, yesterday we talked about the best and worst draft scenarios for the Detroit Lions and came to the conclusion that if the Lions draft either Kayvon Thibodeaux, Aiden Hutchinson, or Kyle Hamilton, that they will get an A grade by a lot of people, and they will get an A grade for the second overall pick if one of those three players ends up wearing the Honolulu blue. But today, we're going to take those top three prospects and we're going to narrow it down to just a singular player. Now, with that being said, and with all the intro stuff out of the way, let's get straight in to talking about the best pick and what the Detroit Lions should do at the number 2 overall pick. Now, before we get into it, obviously, if they can, they should trade down. If they can afford to trade down and acquire an extra first-round pick either this year or next year, yes, you make that trade. But as I mentioned yesterday, since that is not 100% within the Lions' control of things, we will not be talking about that scenario anymore unless it comes to fruition. So with that being the case, let's get into comparing Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeaux, and Kyle Hamilton to see who should be the number 2 overall pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. Now, with that being said, we're going to start off comparing the two positions currently on the team, right? Kyle Hamilton, or Aiden Hutchinson, and Kayvon Thibodeaux are currently edge rushers, and they will be playing the edge position in the NFL, while Kyle Hamilton will be playing the safety position in the NFL. So comparing the two positions that are currently on the roster could give us a little bit of a hint at what they should do. Now, looking at the edge rusher position, the need for edge is significantly smaller than the need for safety help on this roster. Now, with that being the case, Romeo Okwara is coming back from an Achilles injury. The last time we saw Romeo Okwara on the field, he averaged 4 pressures a game. In the season before that, he had 10 sacks and was ranked and was one of the better edge rushers in the NFL. Charles Harris is coming off a career year in his first year on the Detroit Lions defense, having 7.5 sacks while missing a little bit of time, so he could have produced a little bit more, but he's coming off a career year with all the momentum and a second year under the Detroit Lions defensive line coach. I think you could see him even take another step forward. Julian Okwara is coming off a career year as well with 5 sacks, finally stayed healthy for a majority of the season and ended up with 5 sacks, 5 really impressive plays to get sacks on the quarterback. And Austin Bryant had 4.5 sacks a season ago as a career high as well. Now, I'm not saying you can't add competition at the edge rusher position, but those 4 guys alone have the potential to put up 20 to 30 sacks just as those 4. Plus, you add in that Derek Barnes is a good blitzing linebacker. You add in that Jared Davis can be a good blitzing linebacker. You add in the fact that Alex Anzalone will likely get a couple of sacks. Defense is not, or the pass rush really wasn't the problem a season ago. They were top 15 in pressures. They didn't get the sacks because the coverage wasn't there, but as far as edge rusher talent, as far as pass rushing talent, as far as getting pressure on the quarterback, the Lions were not that bad a season ago. They simply put were a average to above average defense when it came to getting pressure on the quarterback. Now, when you look at the safety position, Tracy Walker is your safety 1 and Deshaun Elliott are your safety 2. Neither one of those guys I would say are elite in coverage. I wouldn't say either of those guys are at their best when they're covering the deep middle part of the field, when they're, covering the middle in a cover 3, or when they're covering a half the field in a cover 2 or 2 high shell. That's not their strength. They can do it, but it's not where they thrive. And behind them, meaning if one of them gets injured, if one of them is out for a week, if one of them misses any amount of time, even a single snap, you will be forced to play either CJ Moore, Brady Breeze, or Jalen Elliott as your second safety. And for me, I don't feel comfortable starting any of them. CJ Moore is a fantastic special teamer. Jalen Elliott is a great special teamer. Brady Breeze was a great special teamer last year. Neither one of them, none of the three even, should be playing starting safety in the NFL. That is very apparent. I think anybody would agree on that the safety position is a far bigger need right now than the edge rusher position. I would say edge rusher might not even be a top 5 position for the Detroit Lions to address. Can it be fixed? Can it be upgraded? Can it be improved upon? Can it be improved upon? Absolutely. And I think, you're talking 34, 66, talking Arnold Ebiketie, Drake Jackson, you're talking, some of those guys absolutely can come in and make an impact on day one. Push Austin Bryant for that spot. Push Julian Okwara for that spot. Even push Charles Harris for that position. But addressing it at number 2 just seems like you could be potentially addressing a far bigger need with a player that is very much worthy of the number 2 overall pick. Now, looking at the previous draft classes, comparing this class to the rest of the class, I think the edge rusher position is much, much deeper. Going over guys that I think will come in and be 5 to 7 sack guys, 5+, 6+ sack guys, which would improve the Detroit Lions pass rush statistically. I have 10 players on that list. I think that on day 1, you could expect 6+ sacks out of Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau, George Karlaftis, Trayvon Walker, Jermaine Johnson, Arnold Ebiketie, Drake Jackson, Boye Mafa, David Ajabo, if he is healthy, and Maja Sanders from the University of Cincinnati. Whereas I believe coverage safeties that you could feel comfortable getting significant coverage reps in the NFL, not necessarily starting on day 1, but guys that I would feel comfortable putting in a deep free safety position to go make plays for me, as I don't want to hold the starter against them because I didn't hold that to the edge rushers. I believe the guys that will get significant playing time at some point in the season and guys that I would feel comfortable as my starting safety at the deep middle fielding free safety position are only at 6. Those 6 being Kyle Hamilton, Lewis Sine, Kirby Joseph, Verone McKinley, JT Woods, and at a very last resort, Nick Cross. Nick Cross is very good. He's very fast and actually has some pretty good ball skills. I just think his instincts aren't quite there yet to be a full-time free safety, but if you're talking like coverage or reps, if you're talking like he's playing one game, he's playing, 6-7 deep coverage snaps a game with that speed and that athleticism and ball skills, I could live with Nick Cross as my starting safety because I think he's big enough and athletic enough to go make me some plays. And I think that the Lions defensive coordinator and cornerbacks coach could also help his instincts develop very quickly. So I'd give you 6 players that I would trust as a starting middle fielding free safety. Those are guys that I think would get significant coverage reps on day 1 with the Detroit Lions and guys that I think could make an immediate impact at the safety position. So safety is a bigger need, and the class is weaker at the free safety position than they are at the edge rusher position. So far we're 2-0 for Kyle Hamilton and 0 for 2 for the edge rusher. But when looking and comparing them to draft classes prior, I would say, and I would even argue, that Kyle Hamilton is a top 3 safety of the past decade, with the only exceptions being Jamal Adams when he came out of LSU and being Derwin James when he was coming out of Florida State. Those guys were looked at as generational safeties. Those guys coming out of LSU and Florida State respectively were looked at as potential top 5 picks in the NFL draft. And if you go back to draft rankings, some people had them as high as the number 1 player in the class. Although Jamal Adams gets made fun of a lot for just being a blitzer, just being a strong safety, that's what his role is. And he's very good at that role. Derwin James is arguably the best safety and one of the most impactful players on a defense in the NFL. But outside of those 2 guys, it's going to be hard to make an argument that anybody is better in college football than Kyle Hamilton has been over the last couple of seasons. I think you can maybe make the argument for Malik Hooker from Ohio State also being above him, but at the worst case scenario, Kyle Hamilton is a top 5 safety prospect from the last 2 decades. Whereas Aiden Hutchinson might not even be a top 10 edge rusher, might not even be a top 10 pass rusher from the last 10 years. I mean, if you look at great edge rushers to come out since 2012, so just 10 years ago, you have Chase Young, Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Bradley Chubb, Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, Khalil Mack, Ziggy Ansah, and Von Miller. That is 9 players that were consensus top 5 picks and guys that turned into double-digit sack guys as early as their second seasons, right? Von Miller is a Pro Bowler, an All-Pro, a Super Bowl champion. Ziggy Ansah had multiple seasons of 12 to 15 sacks with the Detroit Lions. Khalil Mack, perennial All-Pro. Jadeveon Clowney and multiple seasons of top production in the NFL. So far, hasn't really lived up to the number 1 overall pick, but was certainly a better prospect than Aiden Hutchinson. You then go on to Myles Garrett, arguably the best edge rusher in the NFL. You go on to talk about Bradley Chubb, top 5 pick by the Denver Broncos, one of the better edge rushers in the NFL. Both of the Bosa brothers are some of the top edge rushers in the NFL, as is Chase Young, who didn't have a great season last year, but was unanimous Rookie of the Year, one of the best edge rushing prospects to ever come out of college football. And again, I'm not grading them and I'm not ranking them off of what they've done in the NFL because that would simply be unfair to Hutchinson. I'm ranking them simply off where they were as prospects. I would almost unanimously and very, very comfortably take all 9 of those guys over Aiden Hutchinson. And that's not even mentioning interior defensive linemen like Ndamukong Suh, who I would also take very, very heavily over Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeaux. I don't think either one of them crack a top 10 edge rushing prospect in the last decade, whereas Kyle Hamilton might be a top 5 safety prospect over the last 20 years. So you're talking about a bigger need. You're talking about a better player in a weaker position in the class, with him being a more rarity, and with that position being a far more rarity of, players being taken at the top. Kyle Hamilton seemingly is running away with this competition. And to be totally honest, I don't even know if Kayvon Thibodeaux and Aiden Hutchinson go as a number 1 edge rusher next year either, because Will Anderson from Alabama is right up there with arguably the number 1 pick next year in the 2023 NFL draft. So if he's not a top 10 player of the last decade, he might not even be the top edge rusher in any class outside of last year's incredibly weak class, and he wouldn't even be the number 1 edge rusher next year. Let's use the same logic we put on Malik Willis. If he's not the best next year, and he is not the best over the last couple of years, why is he the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft? Whereas Kyle Hamilton, sure, he might not be as good as Derwin James. He might not be as good as Jamal Adams coming out. He might not be as good as Malik Hooker coming out of college. But he is certainly a top 5 safety prospect over the last 2 decades, which is far rarer and far more impressive than maybe a top 15 edge rusher prospect over the last decade of just 10 years. So with that being the case, that is why I think Kyle Hamilton should be the number 2 overall pick. The Lions' need for a safety heavily outweighs their need for an edge rusher. Their safety position right now is 1 injury, 1 false positive COVID test, 1 sprained ankle, 1 broken finger, 1 bad step, and 1 bad hit away from being starting CJ Moore and Jalen Elliott as your starting 2 safeties in the NFL. Tracy Walker did miss some time a season ago. Deshaun Elliott, I think, has only played 1 full season of the 3 in his career. They're 1 bad step, they're 1 bad hit, they're 1 rolled ankle or broken finger away from missing time and starting a special teamer as your starting safety. Kyle Hamilton would fill that need, put him at a starting safety position. Deshaun Elliott would be the 3rd safety, would rotate around plenty, get plenty of snaps, have plenty of impact, but then your rotation and then your depth is significantly better. And I believe even with the Deshaun Elliott signing, I think they could address safety twice in this draft. I think they could pick up Kyle Hamilton at 2 and JT Woods in the 170 range if he ends up falling that 4, or Nick Cross with the 100, maybe if you trade for a 4th round pick. They could take a safety on day 3 that is incredibly impactful, and Kyle Hamilton, who's also a good coverage safety, and still have good depth at that position while not wasting too many draft assets. Whereas I think edge rusher can be addressed at 66, it can be addressed at 34, or even 32. There's going to be good edge rushers at 32. Boye Mafa will be available. Arnold Ibiketti is going to be right around that range, right? Boye Mafa, I believe I already mentioned. David Ajabo is going to be right around that range. There's going to be some good quality edge rushers at the 32, 34th, and even maybe 66th overall position. But Kyle Hamilton and no safety near Kyle Hamilton will be available at the 32nd overall pick. So with that being said, as the Lions have a bigger need at the position, they have a better player graded for that position, with the Detroit Lions having the better grade for the player at a weaker position on the roster, at the biggest position of need, at a harder position to scheme for, because it's much easier to scheme pressure than it is to scheme coverage and turnovers, with two secondary-minded coaches, one of whom is currently the defensive coordinator and one of whom I strongly believe will become the defensive coordinator as soon as Aaron Glenn leaves for a head coaching job either this year or next year. Kyle Hamilton makes the most sense. Now with that being said, I am still 100% behind the statement that I made that whether it's Kyle Hamilton, Aiden Hutchinson, or Kayvon Thibodeaux, I will give this grade an A, because I think all three of them are exactly what the Detroit Lions need. And if they could draft both Hutchinson and Kyle Hamilton, I'd be super happy. If they could draft Kyle Hamilton and Kayvon Thibodeaux, I'd be extremely happy. If they could get both, I would want both, but they can't. And because of that, you have to prioritize need, you have to prioritize grade, you have to prioritize player, you have to prioritize what your coaches are good with working with. And the biggest factor for me is that the Detroit Lions weren't a bad pass rush a season ago. The Lions' problem wasn't pass rush, it was coverage, especially by the safety. So with that being said, with two very high quality defensive backs oriented coaches and with a defensive coordinator that experimented a lot last year with getting some manufactured pass rush, being stunts, being blitzes, being stuff like that, and adding one of the better blitzing linebackers in the NFL in Jared Davis, and giving Derek Barnes, again, a very good blitzing linebacker, another shot and more of a bigger role in the defense, I think the pass rush can improve even if it's not addressed right now. Even if it's not addressed at all in the 2022 class, which I think would be a mistake, but even if it's not addressed a single time in this year's class, I think the pass rush will be better next season. If safety is not addressed even once, I do believe the safety position will continue to be the downfall of the Detroit Lions, and because of that, Kyle Hamilton is my number one overall pick. But with all that being said, that is all for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I'm sure many of you are going to want an edge rusher at number 2, but the value just isn't there. The positional need just isn't there. Kyle Hamilton is one of the best safeties to come out in the last 2 decades. Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeaux are just above average edge rusher prospects. So with that being said, that is all for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions!